Oh, and I sure would love to hear from some first-time callers tonight. But I get it. This is not a subject that we normally talk about on a program, but we've talked about every other kind of... I know it's not the right word to use, but spirituality. We've talked about all different forms of spirituality, and it seems to me a system as old as the Kabbalah, well, we need to talk about it. So I have no idea what your questions might be for my guest tonight, Tony Kosinec. But I can tell you he's really interesting to speak with, and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer your questions tonight. Let me see here now. I was going to go to the wormhole here. Kamantosh sent me this message. Interesting subject tonight. I always thought Kabbalah was only a 1960s glow-in-the-dark spooky fortune-telling board game. Hang on. See, this is what I mean about we just don't know enough about this. And that makes tonight's conversation timely. But I want to welcome Tony Kosinec back to the program because there's a question in this message for you, Tony.
Okay.
It says here, how does Kabbalism relate to Tetragrammaton? Am I saying that right? Tetragrammaton? Are those two things related at all?
Well, I think he's talking about the Greek term Tetragrammaton, which is there are four letters. They call it the four-letter name of God, and it is a Yud, and a Hey, and a Vav, and a Hey. Mm-hmm. And what that is remember at the beginning of the show I was talking to you about that first there was an intention to give totally, and then there was a vessel to receive totally, and then I said it goes through a couple more permutations, and then physical matter appears. That those other permutations, what's being described there is four faces of direct light, which Christianity in Greek calls the Tetragrammaton. Wow. It's a template for absolutely every process in nature. So every change that we undergo goes through this process, and we call it a partsufim. It's like a part of a face. The face, if you're facing a force of nature, that means you're like it. And if you are in the anterior of it, you are opposite to it, or you're becoming like it. So it describes a process by which all transformation occurs. So yes, it is related, and it came originally from Kabbalah.
Okay. Now, on what we were talking about right before the break, I asked you a question. What does this do for me? If I know, I guess, my friend's needs to be more than my own, more important than my own, just as poignant as my own. And I said, and what do I get out of that? So I want to make sure that I really understood your answer, because you gave me a very thoughtful answer, and I want to respect that. Does this mean that the what does this do for me part is irrelevant? Because that's what I got out of your answer. That part is kind of irrelevant.
Beautiful, Heather. That is really beautiful. Yes.
All right.
It is irrelevant. And as a matter of, think about the way that nature works. Think about the trees that simply obey nature. They're out there all winter. They're going through their process. They're bringing forth fruit. They're doing the whole thing. It's hard to say what they're getting out of it. And the animal level, the animate level, simply obeys the law of nature. They're different than us. We have a free will in this regard. Or the inanimate level. It is what it is, and it does what nature tells it to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the tree provides the home for the bird, and there's no thanking between the tree and the bird. It just is.
Yeah, because the force of the Creator is directly in that. That's what it means to obey, and that it is a giving without measurement. There's no consciousness of the self. The only way we measure the self is, what am I getting out of this? Uh-huh. That's how we do that. That's how our consciousness works. So if we are fundamentally focused outside of ourselves, not only do we not think about ourselves, we stop suffering.
Right. And then in turn, one's own needs are met simply because the others out there are also practicing this.
That's right.
Oh my God, this is really something. I'm really enjoying this. Now, there was a wormhole message. I think Smog sent me this wormhole message. So are you going to study the Kabbalah now? Yeah, I think I should. I think I'm, shortchanging myself at this point if I don't, because it's good to know the truth about these kind of things and not the kind of disjointed, fragmented definitions that somebody who isn't steeped in it would know. I want the real answer. That's what I'm trying to get to here. I want the real answer, what it's really all about. And I think this applies to all of us. And I also think, and maybe I'm going a little bit too far here, but I also think that this shift in consciousness we're constantly told about, I think the Kabbalah is a part of that, if not the catalyst of that.
It's the description of that. Because ultimately, Kabbalah is nothing. It is just about human comprehension of nature in its fullness. That's what it is. And it was given to us by nature. And whether you call it Kabbalah or there are pieces of it that are distributed in other places, doesn't make any difference. But what's beautiful about it is that there actually is a coherent science here. Mm-hmm. It can take us, it can really help us. And I think that's why it's kind of cool also that it was disguised for so long. And it created a kind of appetite for it.
Yes, it did. I like how you put that. Yeah, no, it's true. It did. And I think the time is definitely ripe for this. I mean, we could use a little beauty. I mean, it is time. It is overdue for some beauty, for some understanding, for a true reaching out to each other, which it sounds like this system is offering us. Here is a way for you to truly connect to the other in a really unfettered kind of a way, in a way where there are no strings attached. There's no baggage attached to it. It's simply for the joy of that connection, because the connection itself, it seems to me, is what it's all about.
That is the essence of life, actually.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's take some phone calls, Tony, and see what that brings us. And I'm sure, wormhole messages are coming in as well. And I'd like to remind everybody out there listening that you can also call the show on Skype if you have it. If you don't want to, rack up a phone bill or something like that, you can call the program on Skype. If you're in North America, just search for in Skype now. When you have the Skype program open, go to the search bar and just type in MITD 11. If you're in North America, that's Canada, the United States, and Mexico. If you're in North America, then you're more than welcome to call that line. That might save you a phone bill if you don't have an unlimited plan. Other than that, look, the first-time caller line is open. That is 1-775-285-5800, and the public number anybody can call, doesn't matter who you are or where you are, that's 952-225-5278. So let's jump in here, Tony. They're not screened, so I have no idea what we're about to get. And there's a rumor that I plan the calls for the show. No, I have no idea what's about to happen here. I don't have the time to plan out calls to the show.
I'm getting a tingly feeling.
Are you? Good. Okay. That's the way it's supposed to work in talk radio. On the phone, you're on the air with Tony Kosinec. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Heather. Hi, Tony. Thanks for taking my call, Heather. And
you bet.
By the way, Heather did not make me wake up out of a dead sleep and dial the number. I did it all on my own.
Well, 11:41. It's all according to plan here.
Thanks, Tony. Really, if it's okay, Heather, about 30 seconds, a really quick comment. And I have a question for Tony. I'd like to take off the air because I'm at work and kind of running late here. So, Tony, I believe that what you're saying is just awesome, everything. And a quick comment about Jewish people. Bless a lot of the food they eat, making things kosher, which is excellent, I think. But really quickly, Heather, and this is directly related to your show, is that there's some things that some people have in common. I wrote these notes. There's Leonardo da Vinci, Vincent van Gogh, Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, Nikolai Tesla. They were all supposedly vegetarians or vegans. And there's a little environment, a little group of people that, are strict vegans. And that, to me, that's one thing that really inhibits us as a whole, is the way that we treat animals. I'm not talking about Inuits that need to have seal meat, or an expedition in Antarctica years ago. They needed this protein, this meat to survive. The way that we treat animals as a whole, the way we forcibly inseminate them and torture them and murder them, when we really don't need that much meat, and it's just so prevalent. I understand we're not going to stop doing that. It just seems like that's one of the things, talking about nature and trees and birds. There's these bristlecone pine trees that are 5,000 years old up in the White Mountains and Southern California, and animals that live to be hundreds of years old. But this the way we treat cows and pigs and lambs, little baby lambs and chickens, etc. It just, to me, is not good for what you're talking about. And there is a lot of people that decided, and I never thought I'd stop eating meat. I just couldn't imagine it. And I don't want to judge anyone, Heather. I've spoke about this before. It's just, what do you think about that, Tom, as far as the way that we treat animals for our taste buds and our tummies?
Well, I understand your heart, in this matter. The way, first of all, animals are part of us. They're not separate from us. We are a single creature. We are the cosmos. So, and all of these different levels of nature are dependent on us. But once we're into an attitude and an industry of how we treat animals and so on, it's too late. If, according to the feeling of your heart, you would like to see an overarching kindness in the way that we deal with everything, or let's call it something else. Let's call it a correctness in the way that we should be working with nature. It has to start on the intentional level. It can't start with whether we do or don't eat meat, or even how we treat humans. It has to start with, for whom am I living? Why am I eating? What will I do with the energy that I have once I've eaten? And all of those sorts of things, for what reason and for whom. If we do that, then all of that stuff will become ordered and aligned with what nature wants from us. It's not really all that clear what's right and wrong in regards to eating meat or not. And I understand why you feel that way, but if we want to know exactly what is right and to have the best possible outcome for those dear creatures, then we have to start on our own intentional level. When we do that, all of that is going to line up correctly, and it won't break your heart, because you'll know that whatever is happening is right, and perhaps it will go along the line that you're thinking it should be. Maybe it won't, but your heart will be aligned with what is correct. You won't have to waste the emotion on trying to fix it from the bottom up. It has to be from the top down. And you sound like somebody who wants to do that.
Yeah, he does. He truly does. And he has called and talked about that on the program before. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I'm an animal lover. I love all animals. I love all the living creatures, the plants and the trees and the weeds and the rocks and all of it. But even in nature, animals eat other animals. But when you get to the industry part, this is where I have the problem, because nature gives selflessly. Nature gives us everything, and what do? We turn around, we turn it into an industry, and we make money off of what nature gives to us selflessly.
Yeah, we don't need to do it that way, do we? I mean, and we don't need that much of it either.
No, yeah, we don't. Yeah, and again, I don't know what the big the answers are, but this is what I see. I've seen it, growing up my entire life. We commercialize nature. We take what nature gives us for free. If nature didn't create the chicken, there's no chicken to sell. You see, there's no chicken to sell to a guy for a couple of dollars. It's nature is doing the work. When you want honey, I love fresh honey. Well, you got to steal it from the bees. That's the only way you're going to get it. You got to steal it from the bees. And the bees make it. It's their work. And we're just capitalizing off of their work. And this is where I have the problem when it comes to the industrialization of animals. When I see videos about, the way cattle are treated, pigs and poultry are treated, yeah, it breaks my heart too. We've got Alan on the line.
Yes, I had a question. I had for Tony. Tony, was talking to the rabbi. I had a question about a translation of the Hebrew word, and I was trying to. I had a computer program that would give me the definitions and everything, but it wasn't quite matching up with what I thought it should be, and what I was reading from the Greek to the English, and I asked him to help me with it, and he smiled and laughed. He said, "Sit down, Sonny, let me teach you something." And 9 hours later, we were into the Hebrew language itself, and I spent many days with him learning about this. But he taught me that in the Hebrew language, and I know I don't have to tell you, that there are these different levels. It is the most fascinating language. I can't even start to go into that. But one of the levels in the Hebrew language is the mystic level. And I tried to get into it some with him, but he was like, "No, you're not ready for all that." So, but anyway, I know that there is Jewish mysticism, which is something different. But is the Jewish language itself connected to the Kabbalah? I mean, from what I was able to understand and read, and when I look at the two, is there a connection between the language itself and the Kabbalah itself?
Yes.
Good question, Alan.
There's a direct connection. The language, the common language from the time of Abraham and even up until right through ancient Israel and its destruction was Aramaic. The Hebrew language was created by the Kabbalists. It was a take on the Aramaic language, and it was rearranged in certain ways to be consistent and coherent when describing inner states of a person climbing the ladder of attainment. Every letter and combination of letters, they're equations that talk about relationships. They talk about things between people. We commonly think that they're talking about names of people and places. They're not. They're talking about transactions. They are equations. And they're not there in order to they're not on the material level. They seem to be describing places, and now in Israel all of these places are named after these formulae. But the Kabbalists made this language to make it discrete from the other language, because the only thing that this language speaks about is the giving force in nature. It doesn't talk about any of the things that happen in this world. Not a single word in any book, including the Torah, talks about anything in this world. So they crafted the language in a certain way so that it would be distinguishable from the common language, and it would be quote-unquote holy language, in that it was intended to express only states that were not material and that had to do with intention.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so it is deeply linked. In fact, you cannot separate the two.
Yeah, it is the way of one Kabbalist communicating to another something that language has no grip on.
Mm-hmm. And we often say, we're entering a time that we simply do not have the vocabulary for. Mm-hmm. Well, perhaps the Kabbalah does. Maybe that's the vocabulary that we're looking for. But what a good question. One more time here, I just want to thank Alan. Thank you very much for calling in with that question, Alan.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Tony. That is exactly what I thought, but I wanted to make sure, for those who don't know, like if you take the first verse of Genesis, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and you break it down to the Hebrew language, it actually talks about the relationship between, anyway, it gives the whole messianic story in the first verse. When you break it down to the letters and put those combinations together, it blew my mind. I mean, it was a whole story of a relationship between the Father and the Son and the whole thing in one verse, and it just completely blew me away. And I just wanted to thank you for that and for the information.
And thank you very much.
Thank you. Drive safe.
And we'll go back to the phone here. I do have our international caller on my other Skype, so we'll be able to take that call as well. But right now, on the phone, you're on the air with Tony Kosinec. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Heather. It's Lasha calling in from Vancouver.
Well, you say the word mystic, and look who shows up.
I know. Poof.
Well, what are
Heather,
you
I'm
thinking?
loving the show tonight. I'm just loving it. It's great stuff.
Well, this is a weird thing that a host probably shouldn't do, but am I asking the right questions here?
Oh, you're doing absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. He's, where do I start?
Where do you start? I don't know.
First of all, the first thing I want to do is, Tony, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for the study that you've done and for what you bring to the table. I think it's just really, really wonderful. I've studied Tantric Tibetan Buddhism all of my life and practice it very earnestly. I'm very interested to know what the Kabbalists, how they deal with the ego and what kind of, like you were talking that there isn't a meditation, and it seems that a lot of the system of Kabbalism is based on dualism. And in the Buddhist faith, we try to go down the middle path, and we try to transmute our emotions. From desire becomes compassion, and anger becomes wisdom, and these kinds of things. Is that the same sort of thing that happens in Kabbalism? What do they do with the ego?
That's a good question. We don't try to destroy the ego, for sure. We don't, because nothing can be destroyed in the system. What we do is we understand its purpose, and we use it kind of like the way that rocket scientists use the gravity of a planet to sling a rocket in the right direction. In other words, it has a purpose and a gravity that allows us to rise higher and higher in the anti-egoistic level. Instead of trying to eradicate it, what this process does is it expands and then corrects it. It inverts it. And I'll give you an example of an inversion. And it's what we call the middle line, which is somewhat different than the middle road. Well, I'll give you an example. You're invited to a dinner. Your friend knows everything that you want and has decided that they are going to make the most beautiful dinner that will satisfy absolutely everything that you could possibly want. And you come in there and you see all these things set before you on the table. And the first thing you want to do is you want to completely devour it because that's precisely what you want. But something happens. You look and you say, well, I can't accept this because I feel this shame of the position that I'm in purely as a receiver. In other words, as purely as ego. And my friend has given everything to me, and I have nothing, and I cannot give anything to him. I want to be the giver, cries the ego. I want the position that my friend has here. So all of this looks now completely immersed in ego. But the fact is that the one who is giving, the altruistic force, wants you to take that food and wants you to enjoy it so completely because your friend's pleasure depends totally on your accepting and enjoying. So if you accept that and you do eat and you do enjoy, not to fill your stomach and to go by the first impulse that you had, the first use of the ego, but nonetheless use it, but do it only in order to fulfill the desire of your friend who wanted to give you everything, then your use of ego on the intentional level becomes an act of pure bestowal because it's only being done in order to fulfill your friend. And there we rise above the ego, and a unification of consciousness and awareness happens between you and the host. That's basically the way that it works. So it's like using the forces that are there, but inverting their use on the highest spiritual level so that what they are changes. You change reality from that position.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, Lasha?
Wow. This is very instructive. It's very similar to a lot of the aspects of Buddhism and how we transmute and study the ego and then transform it. You can never get anywhere unless you start with a strong ego. Mm-hmm. You have to start from that position. Another thing I wanted to kind of ask about is, what about karma? What happens in the afterlife? I mean, what is the belief system there?
Oh, very cool. Okay.
There is no afterlife. There
Really?
is only a system of reincarnation until one climbs the ladder, and we return immediately back to somewhere close to where we were, and continue evolving in the steps that nature wants to take us. Kabbalists say that going from from death back into life is like changing a shirt. There is no gap at all, because there actually is no death.
Mm-hmm. There's only the transformation from one life to another life.
From one state to another, yes.
From one
because
state.
none of the physical stuff that we see, the physical stuff is all projected by us according to what degree of self-concern we have. It's self-concern that creates time-space separation and what we call matter. Force of gravity is, in fact, egoism. Everything that we see in matter that draws to itself is caused by this fundamental force that nature first created, which is the will to receive. Mm-hmm. So it's a good thing, but it's being evolved over a span of, over steps, over 125 steps, we say. It's not a real number. It is like it represents a completeness of a process. Mm-hmm. So, but we're not truly talking about time, and we're not talking about any break between anything. Life is life always. But what is the quality of life?
Mm-hmm. Well, Lasha?
It's all self-discovery. It's all that. It's all that journey of self-discovery. That's just wonderful. Do you know, in meditation, we actually go and climb that golden ladder. If you get up to the causal realms in meditation, I'm very interested to know why Kabbalism doesn't have any form of meditation, or do they have a prayer practice, or?
Well, prayer is considered to be the actual fundamental gut-level need that appears in a person's desire at any given moment, and it's that by which nature responds to a person. There's nothing that we can do, according to Kabbalah, externally or simply with the mind, that will do anything to make nature and the evolutionary forces work on us in a different way. So, and rather than a meditation, you could say that there's something comparable to that, and that is the complete comprehension of the system. We're expanding how we understand the workings of things through our connection with things. We don't stop any part of it. So you could say that it is a kind of a meditative practice to absorb all of reality in a waking state without requiring the separation between anything.
You could. Actually, you could call that a meditation of sorts. Wow. Well, I thank you very much for the call. Lasha, I really appreciate the call and the great questions, because this has certainly helped me out to ask some questions that I didn't think of. And there are similarities between systems, but the beauty, I think, here is that all roads are leading to the same beautiful place where we serve each other, not ourselves. It's not the idea is not, well, I'm going to take resources away so that I can live. It's not that mentality at all, and I'm really enjoying this tonight. So, any final thoughts there, Lasha?
No, I just think this is wonderful. I'd love you to have more programs like this, looking at different religious systems, and because I think every religious system, even if it's Christianity, like way up in the Jesuits, they have these kinds of beliefs too. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like every major religion has these ways of looking at reality. And you're right, we're missing it.
We are.
The ancient wisdom is so important.
Systems of spirituality seem to have picked up on an idea here, an idea there, Kabbalistic ideas. But here we're going to the source, and that's what I really, really like, going to the source and what we're finding tonight. You know, I can't find anything wrong with anything being said here, and why more people aren't going to this as a system. I just don't know. But, you know, that's for those listening to decide for themselves what they would like to do for this information. It's my job just to help get it out there. So we'll go here to what's serving as our international Skype line tonight. On MITD 11, you're on the air with Tony Kosinec, and welcome to the show.
My question is, and I think it's probably one of the most important questions of this age, and that's how we break the cycle of generation mute at the moment. There are millions of people, and that number is growing every day, who would rather text and chat on their phones than talk in real life all over the phone, and it's a very downward spiral, and just want to know how we break that cycle.
Okay, all right.
Any advice?
Any advice? Okay, Tony?
Well, you know, it's something that happened very, very quickly. There's a reason that it happened. There's a positive reason, and there's also a negative ramification of it. The positive reason is it's a kind of a prosthesis to have us understand how we should be capable of relating to each other, meaning that we should feel each other and be in contact with each other and everything else in the system on an instantaneous and sensitive basis. The internet is part of the dematerializing of our experience. There's a positive aspect there. It's breaking things down, and it's intended to show how to build things up. The other thing that it's breaking down is, and you can see how it dematerializes things. If you put, look at the problems that you have with what happened to the music business, and I'm in the music business, when you put stuff up there or anything, as soon as you digitize it and put it on the web, it is the possession of everybody. And you can't really protect it and make it into private property. You can for a short period of time, but what we're dealing with here is an actual force of nature that is dematerializing our interests and turning them into purely connective and service types of things. So the kids are not given any framework to understand this. They become sort of captivated, and it becomes their environment instead of the human environment. And that's basically what you've said already. The problem is when you plant a seed into a synthetic place, it can't grow. So we need to be more responsible. We have to realize that they are our children, and actually everybody is our child, and that we really have to try to put limits where we can according to what authority we have. Meaning, if it's in your family, do something about it. We're not going to be able to change that whole level and take that away from them. We have to replace it with another type of an environment that's much more interesting to them. And I really do believe that if we had, I've seen it happen with young people in my community, and I'm talking about the Kabbalistic community, and there are thousands and thousands of people in it. And the way that kids are taught and so on, yeah, they've got their phones, but they're very interested in the contact with the other kids. And they live the way that we did, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, where we were out adventuring. But they also have this kind of example of what life could be like if they didn't need the phones. Mm-hmm. But right now it's in the dematerializing state, but don't worry too much about it, because it's being forced on us from above by nature to help us, and it is going to transform into a useful form.
All right. Well, with that, we'll be right back, everybody. And I was listening to you describe something before the break, and it was really interesting to me because here we are talking all night about the structure of nature, nature being the greatest teacher and all of this. And you were saying something like you don't, if somebody's doing something and that's not the right thing, and you don't just tell them no, that's not the right thing. You got to provide another thing. You can't just say no, you have to provide a yes. Well, this nature does also. I'm learning this, and the only reason I'm learning this is because, speaking of nature, I have a stray kitty that I've taken into the house, and in trying to train the kitty, you don't say no because they don't understand. They just don't understand that, but they do understand yes. So when the kitty's doing something the kitty's not supposed to do, you don't just outright say no. What you do is you provide another thing. Say, look, that over there, that's not nearly as interesting as this over here. Why don't you check this out? And then that's when you start to see some progress. So this idea of you can't just put a stop to things. Things have to flow.
Yes, it has to follow desire. Growth always follows desire.
There you go. Yes, that's a very good way of describing it. Yes, it's got to follow the desire. And when you do that, then these things they're not nearly as difficult because you're going with nature and not against it.
There can be a difficult moment when nature first applies pressure to get your attention, and to say, you really don't want to stay here. You're supposed to be moving on and growing. So it'll provide something there that will be, you won't be able to stay.
Yeah, well, nature makes us hungry when we need food, and that doesn't feel too good, but it feels real good when you finally sit down to that meal. Again, This is nature sort of pushing us to help solve a problem by... what? A need. Putting the need in place. I think I'm really starting to understand. Let's go here to the first-time caller line. They've been patiently waiting, and you're on the air with Tozy. I'm sorry, I just combined your name into one word.
It happens a lot, actually.
Kosinec, does it?
Yeah.
Well,
Tozy Kosinec. It's like completely inverted, right?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my brain, but you're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Yes, hello, Heather. I want to thank your guest. He's given me the most insightful explanation of Kabbalah that I've ever heard, and I think your questions have been absolutely excellent in drawing out those insights.
I agree.
Well, it's a little difficult to know how to proceed in uncharted territory, but I'm getting used to it.
No, I think you're at the top of your game tonight. It's the best I've ever heard you and your guest. Anyway, my comment is, I was a little bit. You mentioned you're talking about education, and education. The root word of education is educe, to draw out from within that which is latent. And in that regard, I was a little bit surprised that your guest said there is no meditation in Kabbalah. Because I've known rabbis that have taught meditation, and I've found personally meditation to be, especially heart-centered meditation, a very effective way to sort of get me out of the chatter brain and into my deeper being and to feel love and connection with other people. So I'm wondering if it's just his particular type of Kabbalah that does not do meditation, or are there other types of Kabbalah that do meditation?
Well, let's find out.
Certainly, I'm not saying that there is no such thing as meditation. But it doesn't have anything to do with the lineage, the ancient lineage of Kabbalah. And also, rabbis in general, religionists, don't know anything about Kabbalah. So they may know something that they've received from the tradition that they were in, where they came from and things that were told to them, or they may be actually improvising certain things and combining stuff. But in general, religionists don't learn anything about the intentional level. They don't know anything about root and branch language. It's not their fault. It's that they formed traditions when we lost connection with the upper forces and maintained those traditions. And it's a good thing that they did, because those are memory devices which are now about to, sort of be cracked open and become useful. But what they say Kabbalah is, and what you're going to get from a rabbi, is generally has nothing to do with Kabbalah. It has to do with psychology connected to certain aspects of keeping the physical aspects of the commandments without their intentional level. And a lot of misunderstanding about Kabbalah comes from religionists because they think that they understand it, but they have never been exposed to a real Kabbalist, and in fact they're opposed, or they have been. It's changing now. They've been strongly opposed to any Kabbalist, any prophet that ever, and prophets were Kabbalists, that ever appeared, were always rejected by the religious level of observance, because they're different levels and they serve different purposes. The religious level is based more on the aspects of the will to receive and fulfilling the will to receive and the justification of certain things. I know this sounds somewhat negative, but I'm giving you an honest evaluation of who knows what. One of the reasons there's a lot of misunderstanding about Kabbalah is that people believe that any rabbi knows something about it. I would say that 1 in 1,000 would know.
You have to go to the Kabbalists.
Yeah, you have to go to the Kabbalistic texts. You can't expect somebody who spent their whole life on the material level of interpretation of say, the Torah, to be able to enlighten you about what's actually in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes sense. But
there's benefit. I also meditate, but not for that reason. I do it for physical reasons, and people can do it for psychological reasons. And there's plenty of benefits, and it works in certain religious systems. But it has nothing to do with Judaism and nothing to do with Kabbalah.
Now, when you talk about contemplation in the Kabbalah, is that similar to meditation, or is this an entirely different thing?
It is eyes wide open. It is that whatever is happening, we are working at perceiving the spiritual level right before us, in us, around us, without any intermediary measure, except the desire to reach it and the direct interaction with the light. So it's like waking enlightenment. So it means it's a constant kind of work with the environment that nature has given us, or you can say that God has given us, which is people and society. And in a proper interaction there, once a person is trained, the veil comes off and you see the actions of the Creator right there.
See, that's what I like about this entire thing. There's no middleman between the person, the seeker, and that divinity that the seeker is trying to reach.
There are people. We go from love of friends to love of the Creator. It is impossible to go to love of the Creator because a person fools themselves. The ego, very tricky. And we can say, I'm fine with the Creator. I love this and I have this feeling. But if you put a person in the situation vis-a-vis another person, that love will not pass through that other person and to the Creator because it isn't true. You have to be able to test yourself and correct yourself, and that's the, so to speak, meditative process. If you don't love man, you don't love God. I mean mankind.
This is similar to my own beliefs, but I want to thank our caller. Thank you very much for calling in.
Great question. Thank you for bringing that up.
And a fantastic question. And just a final thought, I was wondering if you had one.
Yes, what I was wondering about, I was thinking particularly about the mystical dimension of Kabbalah, in particular Merkabah meditation, which my understanding is one of the more advanced states. They call it the chariot mysticism or the ascension, so forth. Merkabah, isn't that a form of meditation? Merkabah meditation?
No, and it's not mystical. It is a description of interactions of forces at a certain partsuf, a certain level in the worlds of perception. And a person goes there consciously. There is no meditation connected with that at all. It is a level of attainment that's being described. And the reason that I know that there's plenty of incorrect information out there about what Merkava is, what kind of a state that is, and that it's something in which a person travels. Or there's all kinds of things like that. Mostly because, I would say, primarily because of that everything is written by the Kabbalists, by the prophets, in root and branch language. And if you don't have somebody who has attainment, like an oral teacher who can show you what those things are, and if you're not trained, then one assumes a kind of physical idea about these things, and that they require some sort of separation or some special practice. There are no special practices at all. Nature is very straightforward, naked and direct. We just underestimate and devalue what it's doing. And even we underestimate certain forces inside of us too. We have to come to consciously recognize what they are and consciously be willing to be engaged with them. And they change our perception. There's no practice that a person can do other than wakeful engagement with reality that can alter it.
Mm-hmm. Again, this is another facet that I like. And I also like, by the way, thank you very much for the call, first-time caller. I hope you call back more often. And thank you very much for tuning in tonight. But the thing that I'm really enjoying about the Kabbalah is how specific it is. Oh, I really like that, because we need. I've had enough of vague terms and answers that don't really tell us anything. You know, I love how specific the Kabbalah is. And not only is it specific, it seems complicated at first, but the further you get into this, the more simple things seem to become. Is that inaccurate? I mean, am I getting this wrong?
No, that's right. It is very specific. There are complete maps of all emotional possibilities within a person in all the what's so-called worlds and states, and they're specific, and everybody who does the work experiences exactly the same things at those same stages of development. They see the same spiritual world. It's a shared experience. But what it comes down to is qualities within the human heart, and it's the closest possible science to a person. It is very simple, but what we have to do is we have to unlearn the separation and the complexity that the ego or the will to receive wants. You want to know why space is so vast? Because we want that much difference between you and the next person. That's how far away the will to receive places itself from the source. But it's not a real space.
Well, now you're touching on something very fundamental here, and this is the connection between consciousness and matter. Mm-hmm. And this is huge. It's a hell of a thing to bring up when we only have about 2.5 minutes left of the show. But this is an amazing thing. You just completely blew me away with that. Why is space so vast? Because this is how much distance we want. Oh, man, talk about a mind-blowing concept right there. So our consciousness is directly involved in the creation of matter?
Yes. It's our desire that creates the illusion of matter. And we can, maybe we can get together again and we can talk, a little bit more about that. There are some specifics about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would enjoy that very, very much. If I was going to talk about this subject on the show at all, then we had to have a good person. And my God, have you ever been excellent on this tonight?
And so have you. I really, really enjoyed this. I mean, you are very, very sensitive and very open. And like I said, I really do feel what you're saying, and I think you're a sweetheart.
Well, this is just, I guess, what I call the want to, and that's the wanting to understand something. I mean, I came in here tonight not knowing much at all, and just thought, well, okay, we're going to find out how stupid I am tonight. And no, this stuff is far easier to grasp. I think I just had this preconceived idea. I had my own mental block was in there going, this is too complicated for you. But it isn't. So this is a approachable to everyone. I think this could do good for everyone, even if, like you said, not everybody gets involved in it and decides to go down this path. It still does all of us good. We all benefit from other people studying this, and I really look forward to the next time. Tony, you and I have got to do another program on this because I know there's more to say about all of it, and if you don't mind, I would love for you to come back sometime.
That would be just wonderful, and I truly enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Heather.